World wars lead to the loss of millions of lives, the dissolution of empires, the vanishing of states from the global landscape, the emergence of new nations, the birth of numerous innovations, and the creation of a transformed global reality. Simply put, they change everything, as clearly demonstrated by World War I and especially World War II. But what would happen if World War III started today? How would it start? Let's be real, the probability of such a war is always there. It can be both accidental and purposeful. Accidents may encompass technical failures in nuclear weapons facilities, human errors, the commandeering of control systems by terrorist organizations within the nuclear-armed states, and the unintended launch of nuclear-armed missiles due to external elements such as UFO sightings, natural disasters, or extraterrestrial anomalies like solar flares. It can even be false alarms or computer viruses, such a false trigger to start a war. But the most obvious reason would probably be the escalation of long-term conflicts. Among the serious conflicts capable of provoking the start of a world war could be the aggravation of the dispute between China and the United States regarding the status of Taiwan and world supremacy. Another very possible scenario is the escalation of the war in Ukraine by the Kremlin. Despite the fact that the probability of a direct military confrontation between NATO and Russia is still low, the risk of an escalation of the conflict exists. Even a local conflict between Turkey and Greece can have a huge impact. At first glance, it may seem that this is not serious enough for the beginning of the Third World War. However, if the conflict between these NATO member states escalates into military confrontation, it could have negative consequences for the entire world. The conflict on the Korean Peninsula, the territorial disputes between Pakistan and India, the war in Syria, the Gaza Strip, and other points of conflict are worth mentioning. No one thought that the murder in Sarajevo would lead to the deaths of millions, but it happened. Some countries openly go into conflict or are ready for it. On occasion, they mention their nuclear arsenal or military power. Several of these nations find themselves marginalized by the global community, including North Korea, Iran, and recently Russia. Rogue countries and authoritarian states are the most dangerous, in particular because of the less predictable nature of leaders' actions and fewer institutional constraints. In general, a purposeful conflict can occur due to the redistribution of political and economic spheres of influence or a lack of resources. The attack on any country of the nuclear club, the use of weapons by any member of the nuclear club against a non-member country due to a threat to national security, and a retaliatory strike by another member of the nuclear club in defense of the weaker one can also provoke a war. What situations almost led to the beginning of the Third World War in the past? Even before the end of the Second World War, there was talk of a Third World War. History counts many examples when small military conflicts could become the beginning of the Third World War. In the period between 1945 and the revolutions in 1989 that led to the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, the apocalyptic scenario of a Third World War was viewed primarily as a possible confrontation between the superpowers, the USA, and the Soviet Union. Several times during this period, the superpowers found themselves on the brink of direct military conflict. At the beginning of the Berlin blockade, on June 24, 1948, the military governor of the American zone of occupation, General Lucius D. Clay, proposed breaking the blockade with an armed convoy. However, American President Harry S. Truman rejected this because of the associated risk of war. In the Korean War, 1950–53, there was a constant danger of escalation. For example, General Douglas MacArthur was accused of wanting to use nuclear weapons against China. During the Suez Crisis of 1956, Soviet Minister Mykola Bulganin sent a note to British Prime Minister Anthony Eden with a warning: if this war does not stop, it would be in danger of turning into the Third World War. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 is considered the point at which the risk of World War III was greatest, and Robert McNamara has stated that if not for Vasil Arkhipov, who prevented a nuclear launch on a Soviet submarine at the height of the crisis, then World War III would have started. The same thing happened later. On September 26, 1983, Soviet early warning stations under the command of Stanislav Petrov mistakenly detected 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Petrov correctly assessed the situation as a false alarm and did not report his discovery to his superiors. Petrov's actions most likely helped to avoid a nuclear conflict. Since Soviet policy at the time would have caused a nuclear response, after the detection of the ballistic missiles. Similar errors in notification systems also happen in the USA. Even military exercises can cause escalation. For example, NATO's Able Archer 83 exercise starting on November 2, 1983, was considered a possible provocation by the USSR. In response, it prepared to bring the nuclear forces and the Air Force in East Germany and Poland into a state of combat readiness. Other historical moments of tension were Sino-Soviet border conflicts in 1969, the Yom Kippur War superpower tensions, 6th to 25th October 1973, the Norwegian rocket incident on January 25, 1995, between Norway, the USA, and Russia, the incident at Pristina Airport on June 12, 1999, between NATO and Russia, and the shooting down of a Russian Sukhoi bomber by Turkey on November 24, 2015. As we can see, there was a lot of tension between the world's strongest states. These states have significant influence and many allies, so that can lead to a global conflict. Suppose that the USA, NATO countries, Israel, Taiwan, Ukraine, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and some other states would be involved in this war against China, Russia, Belarus, North Korea, Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, parts of the Arab countries, and some other states. Suppose that the position of many countries would fluctuate, but sooner or later they would be drawn into the war. So what would happen if the Third World War begins today? A possible answer is the nuclear threat and the destruction of the world. Considering the rapid advancements in potential scenarios for a Third World War featuring nuclear weapons, it's worth noting that the initial retaliatory strike, capable of annihilating the enemy's major cities and military installations, could transpire in a matter of minutes. As per calculations in the scientific journal of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, deploying 5,000 nuclear warheads with a combined yield of 2 gigatons on major cities in the Northern Hemisphere could result in the simultaneous demise of 750 million people due to a single destructive element, the shockwave. However, despite the existing military potential of the states that are members of the nuclear club, the likelihood of the use of nuclear weapons by these states remains low due to the current lack of an effective defense strategy that would be able to protect the aggressor from retribution from the victim. Attempts to create an effective missile defense system have had some success, for example within the framework of the SDI program, but the effectiveness of such a system is far from 100%, and the risk of falling under a nuclear attack on one's own territory, even on a much smaller scale than on the enemy's territory, is politically unacceptable for all developed countries. But would such a risk be unacceptable for example, North Korea? Currently, the sole method of safeguarding against nuclear weapons is to place economically vital installations in deep underground bunkers. This is an exceptionally challenging endeavor from an economic perspective, and as a result, only highly critical defense entities such as NORAD, situated in Cheyenne Mountain, employ underground shelters. North American Aerospace Defense Command, a joint initiative of the United States and Canada, offers aerospace surveillance, air sovereignty, and protection for both countries. Nevertheless, in practice, the devastation of defense facilities, including military-industrial complexes, and critical infrastructure like ports, bridges, transport hubs, and power plants, along with a significant civilian population residing near the target areas, while highly severe, is not an insurmountable catastrophe on the national and global scales. The presence of an effective civil defense system can substantially reduce civilian casualties. For instance, Switzerland has a well-established network of nuclear shelters, which, following the Fukushima nuclear incident, gained renewed importance as protection against potential man-made disasters of this kind. It's entirely plausible that a conflict involving thermonuclear weapons may extend beyond mere reciprocal bombings following the initial and retaliatory strikes. Instead, it could evolve into conventional warfare, with parties vying for control over specific theaters of military operations. The selective use of nuclear weapons might readily lead to further escalation and more extensive mutual destruction. Many countries have implemented civil defense systems, including underground subway networks, in preparation for war. However, the efficacy of underground shelters in preserving lives and aiding survival in a nuclear attack, while radiation remains elevated, remains a subject of debate. The beginning of a global nuclear war would look like this. Between the warning of the country's population about the beginning of a nuclear war and the explosion itself, there are no more than 10 to 14 minutes. The government receives earlier warnings if there are modern missile defense systems, but it takes time to trigger a general warning. Not so many people would be able to find underground shelter during this time. After this, millions of people who did not have time to find shelter would instantly become victims. But those who were able to survive the explosion would soon face a painful fate. Even far from the epicenter of the explosion, the territory would most likely be uninhabitable for many decades due to radiation. However, all the consequences of a nuclear war can only be discussed in theory. Even if a global atomic war does not lead to the death of all living things and humanity survives, it would survive as our ancestors did several hundred years ago. The technological and information wars are the keys to the 21st century. The Russian-Ukrainian war experience offers valuable insights into anticipating the dynamics of a potential Third World War. Notably, technology now plays an increasingly significant role in granting soldiers better territorial control. Regions previously patrolled by brigades of thousands are now overseen by battalions of several hundred. In Ukraine, around 350,000 Russian troops will be deployed along a 746-mile front in 2023, averaging about 469 soldiers per mile, considerably fewer than during World War II. On the surface, this might seem advantageous for attackers, as thinner front lines are easier to breach. Advanced sensors, precise ammunition, and improved digital networks enhance target identification and elimination. However, offensive forces must still concentrate to break through fortified front lines, which can be detected and targeted, albeit not always, but more frequently than before. Consequently, ground warfare experiences a notable shift in favor of the defender. This creates a paradox. High-precision warfare can offset some advantages of massive armies, but it doesn't entirely replace the need for numerical strength. Artificial intelligence would be everywhere in this war. The capabilities of advanced algorithmic combat systems are so formidable that their advantage can be likened to the superiority of tactical nuclear weapons over conventional ones. The kill chain, which outlines the steps for target destruction, enables the immediate retrieval and analysis of data from satellites, yielding the most precise real-time situational awareness. Equipped with this up-to-the-minute information, commanders can effectively navigate through the ambiguities inherent in warfare, often referred to as the fog of war. Utilizing AI, analysts discern the enemy's location and determine the most suitable weaponry for the current scenario. An essential function of these digital systems is to forecast and devise optimal combat strategies based on the prevailing circumstances. The tactics of the world's most advanced nations hinge on the swift deployment of rapid response units, drones, missiles, and aircraft. Yet these tactics prove pivotal, primarily in situations where the adversary lags in technology or the conflict remains geographically limited. The development and application of cutting-edge technologies would be a crucial factor in achieving success. The Internet would emerge as a new global battleground, with initial attacks directed at the computer systems governing civilian and military operations. Gaining a strategic advantage involves disrupting the enemy's communication channels, sowing chaos, hindering their ability to respond to attacks, and mobilizing the population and military. Immediate assaults would also target computers that support critical city functions and infrastructure, including telecommunications, water supply, electricity, fire services, transportation, and more. Despite these measures, global conflict and widespread destruction would quickly become known to humanity. Online hostilities and propaganda campaigns would commence, accompanied by hacking operations targeting websites and servers to gather classified information or disseminate deceptive data that benefits another nation. In a prolonged conflict, a struggle for the support and allegiance of the general population would take place. The Internet would serve as a more effective medium for propaganda compared to what existed in previous eras. This battle would extend to shaping the opinions of nations not yet engaged in the war. In a worldwide conflict, every potential resource becomes valuable. Information and various forms of pressure would foster instability in neutral countries, making global warfare a prevailing topic across the globe. Some nations, however, have robust safeguards such as stringent internet censorship. Yes, nothing happened in Tiananmen Square. Economic collapse, large-scale ruin, victims, and refugees, the long-term crisis would be a global legacy. A world war's aftermath would bring suffering to all, with each passing day adding to the toll of victims. The war would result in a staggering loss of life and mass displacement, creating an unprecedented number of refugees and internally displaced individuals. Many would seize the chance to escape the conflict to neutral nations, seeking refuge from the battlegrounds. A global conflict would trigger substantial transformations in the world economy and supply chains. The initial days would be marred by panic in many countries, rapid price hikes, increased crime rates, traffic congestion, acts of terrorism, protests, and more. Rapid economic deterioration would ensue as former key trading allies transform into opponents, with each side striving to cripple the resources of the other. The potential shifts in world GDP, oil production, human development indices, etc. are hard to fathom. The impact of the war would reverberate across all aspects of people's lives. For many countries, the consequences may surpass those of previous global financial crises, jeopardizing their stability and preparedness for conflict. The resulting humanitarian crisis would be unprecedented, paralleled by the destruction of humanity's cultural heritage, infrastructure, and all other assets. A protracted conflict would lay the groundwork for a possible worldwide famine, particularly in the most vulnerable nations. Even neutral states would suffer significantly as the warring factions prioritize their own interests over all else. It's difficult to even imagine the ecological consequences of such a disaster. Any military conflict causes enormous damage to the environment. Ecosystems cannot be divided by conventional boundaries by drawing them on a map. If the natural balance is destroyed in one geolocation, it will definitely be felt in another. The global war will result in numerous explosions in fuel and lubricant depots and petroleum product storage facilities, leading to environmental repercussions. These will encompass air raids on facilities utilizing hazardous chemicals in their manufacturing processes, along with the disruption and destruction of treatment plants, resulting in sewage contamination of water bodies. Furthermore, it will cause harm to the soil cover and extensive forest fires, particularly in protected natural areas. Thousands of plant species may face extinction as a result of the conflict. The warfare disrupts the tranquility of wildlife, causing them to either perish or seek refuge to escape the conflict zones. Military operations will unfold in regions of international significance, eradicating habitats for rare and unique species, thereby potentially altering bird behavior, including migration patterns. Forests, essential for global food security and playing a protective role, will be decimated by combat operations, impacting the climate and potentially triggering substantial erosion, including wind erosion and desertification. All of these consequences will inevitably have repercussions for agriculture. During rocket and projectile detonations, a range of chemical compounds forms, including carbon monoxide, brown gas, nitrogen dioxide, formaldehyde, and more. The explosion results in the complete oxidation of these substances, releasing the products of this chemical reaction into the atmosphere. Importantly, polluted air transcends borders. Emissions generated by the war traverse, settle, and impact the territories of other nations, often at distances spanning thousands of miles. Landmine detonations contaminate the soil with heavy metals like lead, strontium, titanium, cadmium, and nickel. This contamination renders the soil hazardous and, in some cases, unfit for future agricultural purposes. Explosions also give rise to forest fires. The potential outcomes of a nuclear war have the theoretical capacity to trigger catastrophic shifts in the planet's climate and environmental conditions, commonly referred to as a nuclear winter or nuclear autumn. This perspective has significantly influenced the role of nuclear weapons as a tool of strategic deterrence, discouraging adversaries from initiating a nuclear conflict. In the worst case, a substantial volume of nuclear fallout would disperse globally, resulting in a prolonged increase in background radiation on Earth that can cause the death of billions. A new world war, new opportunities. As the saying goes, maintaining optimism even in the direst situations is crucial. Let's attempt to identify positive aspects in the event of World War III erupting today. Firstly, it's important to recognize that ultimately, the conflict will come to an end, paving the way for peace. The aftermath of the war will undoubtedly trigger a profound and unpredictable transformation in the landscape of international relations. Countries will need to swiftly adapt to these shifts in the midst of ongoing turmoil and violence. Comprehending these potential consequences reaffirms the critical need for global leaders to prioritize diplomacy over warfare as we navigate our interconnected future. As geopolitical structures evolve, influential international organizations such as the United Nations and the World Health Organization may see their roles and authority challenged due to decreased cooperation among powerful nations. This could open the door for the emergence of new institutions and organizations dedicated to addressing urgent global challenges that arise during times of conflict. Amidst the wreckage of the old world, Opportunities for growth and advancement may emerge if humanity can safeguard its previous accomplishments. Wars often stimulate rapid technological advancements as countries allocate substantial resources to research and development for military purposes. Once the dust settles, these technologies may transition to civilian applications, accelerating overall societal progress. For example, innovations in areas like post-conflict reconstruction, environmental restoration, and medical advancements may bring about positive changes. The devastating consequences of World War III can underscore humanity's shared aspiration for peace and a collective commitment for preventing the recurrence of such catastrophic events. The collective trauma experienced during this conflict will have profound and far-reaching effects. It can prompt introspection regarding past mistakes and drive us to seek more diplomatic solutions as we move forward. Due to the extensive impact of World War III on countries worldwide, governments may be inclined to strengthen diplomatic bonds with one another in an effort to avoid future conflicts. This renewed emphasis on diplomacy has the potential to usher in a new era of international cooperation and peaceful dispute resolution. Such a movement towards an ideal world is possible even without war, but a lot still needs to be done for it. What if World War III never happened? In this scenario, the world would persist along its current trajectory. Periodically, local conflicts, revolutions, and wars may emerge. Economic rivalries, military exercises, and the quest for influence would remain integral to the major powers. However, the overarching result would be global peace and stability for the majority of the world's populace. Nations would increasingly shift their focus towards economic and social advancement rather than engaging in military confrontations. This outlook would become more prevalent across the globe. The frequency of conflicts and casualties would gradually diminish. The absence of war paves the way for economic expansion. Countries would no longer need to allocate extensive resources to massive military expenditures, enabling greater investments in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Scientific research and innovation can thrive in an environment of healthy competition and the innate human aspiration for improved living standards. Over time, international cooperation would strengthen through heightened accountability, fortified diplomatic relations, and active participation in global initiatives addressing issues such as climate change, global health, and poverty reduction. The absence of large-scale conflicts would safeguard millions of lives and the existing environment. Art and culture would also prosper during peacetime, as would social well-being. Populations across the globe could enjoy enhanced social conditions, improved living standards, and increased access to education and healthcare. The future. If World War III were to occur in today's world, it would emerge as a global conflict involving numerous nations and would have profound implications for the state of international relations. The worldwide scope of such a conflict has the potential to reshape the established global order. Many powerful countries would probably lose their role. The dynamics of a global conflict in the 21st century would be fundamentally influenced by technological advancements, yet it would likely be a protracted engagement. In this context, the internet would play a pivotal role. Initially, cyber attacks on systems governing civilian and military infrastructure would be a primary target. The primary objectives would encompass disrupting communications networks and sowing chaos. Subsequent phases of the conflict would involve online propaganda, hacking, and disinformation campaigns, further intensifying the confrontation. Given the global reach of the internet, even neutral countries would be drawn into this information warfare. The immediate aftermath of such a world war would entail economic collapse, widespread devastation, and severe environmental damage. However, amid this destruction, there may emerge opportunities for recovery and advancement if humanity can preserve its prior achievements. Diplomacy, cooperation, and the pursuit of peace would become even more crucial in the post-war era. There is no need for another world war to understand such basic things. Humanity should strengthen the influence of international organizations that help states and people resolve conflicts. Politicians must understand that cooperation with others is important for global stability. Many recipes for presenting wars are offered, from economic integration and globalization of the world to building up one's own army. The only common thing is the understanding that if the Third World War started today, tomorrow might not come. Millions of people would be mobilized to the battlefield, and cruelty and anger would become commonplace for the millions or billions of broken hearts of those who survived. Analysis of the prospects of this war is important for the realization of all mankind. There will be no winners in this war. Do you think there would be? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more military content and analysis.